Hi, I'm Genevieve Petty,
I'm David Petty.
and we teach at Cold Spring. We are married, and we both teach at the Cold Spring Elementary, and we do the robotics program together. David pushes and does most of the VEX stuff. I help him and also do more of our feeder programs. So that's why we're talking together today about building a robotics team.
Okay, so today we're going to cover the following. Building enthusiasm within your building, using other school programs in order to foster a better VEX program, explaining robotics to parents and students, how to have tryouts in order to get the right team members, choosing your team members, how many, different kinds, etc., which is very important, and then creating a team and maintaining it throughout the long season.
Okay, we're going to start by saying that we do recognize that we have a STEM certified school, and so STEM is kind of our focus, but and that helps. But that also our building is all in to all robotics. Our principal frequently jokes about the fact he had no idea when they hired him what it meant when they talked to him about the importance of robotics in our building. He does now. We have banners when you enter the school about the kids. There's the pictures, the trophies are there. We talk about it with everything. Some of our faculty joke about the fact that they can't get through a day without hearing robotics several times. So a lot of that is stemmed from the interest that we've been able to build as far as talking about what we do with the kids, inviting people to be at their practices, and the fact that we recognize and honor the fact that it's a competitive team, that it's important to us, and that this isn't a group of kids who get together and drive a remote control car, which is what a lot of people think when they hear about the robotics. They don't understand all the other coding things. So the more you can get people to understand what all the robotics program entails, the more interested they are in what the kids are doing. We also run it like a competitive team, which is where sports falls in.
Right. So I'm also the athletic director, and being the athletic director, we follow a lot of the same guidelines and rules as athletics. And so we'll still announce our results on the intercom. We'll treat it just like an athletics team. You know, the kids get to wear their basketball jerseys on game days, and these kids get to wear the robotics shirts, and we treat that as part of the dress code. And so that's kind of helped as far as the kids taking it as a serious competitive team.
And because it so frequently involves kids who aren't your typical, basketball stars,
Athletics kids, yeah.
then those kids have a place and a niche within the school. And so that helps us out a lot as well. One of the ways that we drummed up a lot of enthusiasm in the robotics program, especially this year, was something we didn't realize would take off quite to the extent that it did with the kids. And as far as having them be part of a team, they all had jackets. We went with having jackets because when we had the kids wear t-shirts as the weather went on, when they would end up at tournaments with hoodies over them and things like that. So this year we did a jacket so the kids always had them visible. And so as the season progressed, for different goals and trophies that they would be awarded, they would bring the jackets in and we would add to them. So the TWC is Teamwork Challenge, EXC is Excellence, the Indiana with a Q is a state qualifier. We made a world's qualifier, but they didn't get on the jackets before we left school. The Control Freak was another honor one that not very many of the kids had. That was because we had a tournament that we hosted for new teams, and so our teams that were doing well were not eligible to compete. That wasn't fair. And so they came and they worked and they reset the games and they were runners, and so they got that way. And so this has become a talking point with their classmates. They'll be like, they'll notice that they got something on their jacket. They talk about that. The kids get to wear their jackets at school. And so it seemed like a really small thing that turned into a real talking point amongst kids and a reason for them to get to talk about how the tournaments went or how they were doing, which drummed up enthusiasm with younger kids and other classmates.
Right, and so she made these with her Cricut Maker, which is a little pricey. And then we also went ahead and purchased a heat press, like you would see at Worlds if you've been, in the customization tent or booth or whatever you want to call that, where they make t-shirts. And so and it's been an investment worth having. So we print our own t-shirts, we're able to get jackets for relatively cheap. And so this seems like if you had somebody do this and constantly took them back to add trophies and whatnot, that would be very pricey. But by making this investment of $600 or $700, now we're able to have this and do this over, the countless number of years. Like I think she just told me today, I have another 13 years worth of teaching before I'm allowed to retire, if VEX is still around then. But anyway, so naming the jacket, you notice it says Whitney on there. Putting their name on the jacket, that provides a lot of ownership, and it's a lot more valuable than a generic t-shirt that doesn't have their name on it. So definitely, I think naming that jacket or naming that shirt and getting their actual name printed on the shirt has a lot of power involved in it. And then we go beyond by not just giving it to our teams, but if somebody works at a tournament and has been supportive of the team, we'll reward them with a jacket at the end of the year, which shows a couple of refs that were there every tournament, all 3 or 4 tournaments. They received a jacket. Our administrators, again, that buy-in from administration is very important as far as getting to host tournaments, getting a line in the budget, things like that. So getting your administrators to wear jackets that have their name on it, that shows a lot of support and buy-in from them also.
And so we're not saying everybody should run out and buy jackets or buy a Cricut, but what we're saying is that there are elements that you can create an ongoing conversation about the robotics team. And so as the kids get the jackets changed or added to, or like I said, the parents got them or faculty members got them, it became a joke at the end that the faculty members said that next year they want us to be able to add stuff to their jackets, like every tournament they work or things like that. So there was a definite like varsity letterman energy created around the kids who had jackets. They wouldn't take them off. They wore them all the time. And so that was also fun for the kids. And like I said, the more kids you have asking other kids about the robotics program instead of the teachers talking about it, the better that is for your program as a whole. So the kids' energy was much better facilitator than us saying, hey, robotics is really cool. We're going to qualify this by saying that we are hearing from things about the summit that a lot of things about the way that we have done robotics in the past is going to change this year, and maybe for a year and maybe forever. So what we can tell you is what we've done in the past, and I'm sure that we will have to modify things, but as far as how we found the kids that were with us, that kind of thing will remain the same. So one of the first things we do is, because we are both related arts teachers, we do have the ability to talk to all of the kids over the course of the beginning of trying to find a season. So we can show them the video of the new game, and we can talk about it, and we can draw out those kids who maybe wouldn't necessarily think that they would be good robotics kids to come and listen to us or be part of the discussions as to what a robotic team entails. We also have a meeting with the parents that we do at the back to school night. And so it's not like a separate meeting, but, an extension of the night the parents are there, and then they come and we talk to them about our expectations, what the parents have to be willing to understand, what the kids will be expected to do. And so before we begin, we have made clear the responsibilities and our expectations by how much time is invested, and explain that not everybody will get to be on the competitive team. And we've done that before we start even talking about or passing out tryout forms.
So team needs, it's definitely important as a coach, before you go into any tryouts, that you have a solid grasp on what you need as far as the different roles of all the participants. So we don't just need individuals who are able to handle the pressure of driving and are able fast with their fingers in order to be able to use the controller. We need those people who can do the tedious task of over and over and over again coding in order to get the code just right. And the individuals who are more the artsy kids who love scrapbooking or just putting together that design book. Now this year we hear that they're likely going to be electronic books instead of the scrapbook, but the same kind of idea of page layout and design and what looks nice, in addition to the technical aspect of the design book, is still very relevant. And so you're looking for a variety of kids and not just the ones that's going to be on the forefront of driving. And so understanding what you're looking for at that initial phase, that way during tryouts you're trying to identify all those different characteristics in order to kind of pull those kids into the team and to get them at tryouts in the first place.
The thing about understanding those team needs is that sometimes that's when you step in as your teacher need comes ahead of your coach need. And so sometimes there are those kids that we know need robotics more than we might necessarily think we need them on the robotics team. And so we have solicited kids that we think could really glean some personal growth by being with us. Like, for instance, one of our boys this year is not a kid that we would have considered, and most people kind of challenged our decision to encourage him to be in the robotics team because he was an artsy kid and he was an anime kid, and we knew he couldn't attend tournaments because of his living situation with his parents. But he was great about coming in and getting the robot and doing sketches of the robot and understanding those kinds of things for the book. So sometimes when you consider what a team needs, you go out and you find those gamers who are good with a controller, but then you also find those kids that are detail oriented, who would be really good at controlling a book, or those kids who can work really well with others and are great motivators, kind of, and well liked. So it takes a real balance. Before we even begin our week of tryouts, we send home kind of a memorandum of understanding in the form of a permission slip, in which we have the students and parents both sign that they understand what the robotics team entails. And that way, from the get-go, we have nobody saying, I didn't know we had 3 practices a week, or I didn't know I'd have to be there on tournaments, or my parents can't get me to and from. And so these are things we give them before we even let them stay for tryouts. And so that paperwork has gone home. Then once we have all that and the kids stay for tryouts, then the first thing that we go through with them is an application. And the application has open-ended questions on it, like what do you think your strengths are? What are you wanting to bring to a robotics program? What are you helping to learn? And then one of the questions that I liked that David added this year was about taking your favorite toy or game and modifying it. What would you modify? How would that help it? And so these things were beginning to get the kids through an understanding of a mindset about what the robotics team was about.
Right, and that was, you might have to come up with your own question. I mean, we do a lot with PLTW, the design process. I run an engineering class. I knew that this was tangible for them. This was something they should be able to do. But it also talked about, the engineering process. And so it was just a way for us to see their creativity, and could they come up with this on their own. Obviously when we do it in class, they're within small groups, not this year, but generally they're within small groups and they kind of feed on each other. So this was an individual activity.
And as your tryouts progress, and maybe you have 50 some kids try out and you don't have enough supplies, and this is one of the things that starts a lot of conversations with us and other people, is they'll say, well, we have 14 teams this year and there'll be 2 coaches. Well, you got to look at your supplies. You have to have enough supplies that every team could conceivably have 2 robots going at the same time, things like that. So if you only have 4 brains, you can't keep 40 kids. It's not going to facilitate a program that can grow. So if you set yourself up by having so many kids that you can't have a successful team, then you're also going to find that you can't get support and enthusiasm because you haven't had a successful team. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. At the end here, we'll talk about some stuff we do with the kids who don't make the competitive team. But if you have so many kids at your tryouts that building bots that we're going to talk about here as a speed bots isn't an option, even any of the Destination Imagination challenge games or the building things, if you had groups work on that, you can still do the same thing by watching how do they interact with each other, how do they feed off each other's ideas, are they respectful, are they creative. So even if you don't have enough supplies that you can let every kid build a basic bot at a tryouts, there are things you can do to ask them to think about and understand a design process and alter a design with each other.
Right, and so as far as the actual contract at the end, so gone through tryouts, have a completed application, they're going to make the team, then we actually have them sign like an ethics contract so that they understand that, they've got to be able to work, use constructive criticism, communicate effectively, and if they don't do these things, they're going to get a warning and then there's going to be dismissal. And they have to sign it. Their parent has to sign it. Again, just putting all that information out front of any type of difficult conversation that you're going to have either with the student or parents or both, so that, it's been communicated. You have something in writing. It makes it a lot easier if that parent then goes to administration.
Give administration a copy, show it to them before tryouts.
And you say, look, this is what we got, and we want this to be a competitive team. So again, we have a model for that through athletics. It's the more you treat it like an athletic team, a competitive team, the easier I think you're going to find it to be successful in building a team that has clear communication and everybody is on board. And it's easy to get enthusiasm and rah with something that is competitive, especially when you find a little bit of success.
Okay, so when we began tryouts and we have the kids that had stayed, again, we're a PLTW school, and so we get it that we have lots of brains and things to pull from. So we could have all the groups of 2 or 3 kids build a basic bot, and we get that is a luxury we have. And if there are alternatives and things that you could do with kids that did not involve, you can make coding challenges, things like that. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is come up with a way for them to think outside the box and work together collaboratively to come up with something. But in our case, at tryouts, we did a series of a version of the Mario Kart balloon game.
Right, and so the students were provided after we showed them the video and everything and our design books and whatnot, then we directed them to a link that you'll see later if you go to building a robot section, to where they have instructions online about the speedbot. And the speedbot's very quick. You can build it in just a few hours. And seeing as how we only had these kids for a week and we wanted them to have a robot built, modified, used, remodified, or redesigned, and then used again, we knew we needed something quick. So we always just use the speedbot as a basic build. So they have the speedbot. They build this following the online instructions. Right, somebody's pulling parts. Other kids are following the instructions for the build, and then we get to the point that the game it's built, and so they play a game. And so basically we, they get to drive it a little bit, but then they have a dart, and we just took basically like a balloon dart and gave that to them and told them they need to put it on there. They need to find a way to attach it to the speedbot where it wouldn't damage any other robot, but could pop a balloon. And the balloon was going to be at the height of the back of the robot. And these are just little balloon dart balloons that we taped onto the back of the speedbots. And so they had to figure out a way to modify the bot, draw that out, design it, document it, just like they would in a book. That's one of the reasons we showed them the design book, right? And so then they do that basic design for the first time. Then they compete in a little game where they're trying to pop each other's balloons, just like on Mario Kart. And then they get to go, okay, so this is what worked, this is what didn't, we won, we lost, whatever. And now we're going to go back and we're going to modify this robot and replay the game.
And we also put in rules. Like once your balloon was popped, you had to return to base before, or once you popped a balloon, you had to return to base before you could pop somebody else's balloon. We put in things about if your robot damaged another robot, then the balloon was replaced and things like that. So we put these contingency rules on and stuff, partially to watch their willingness to follow protocols and understanding for games. As you watch the video, you'll see different kids' interactions with each other. You'll see some of them are intent and quiet, and some of them are encouraging and hollering. But what we were paying attention to during that time, and even more so during the 30-minute you get to modify your robot, we were wondering and watching to see how they worked with each other. Did they listen for other people's advice? Did they take over? Did they have constructive remarks to make to people? When they played the game, were they positive reinforcers? Even so much as you'll see some of the members, congratulate other teams or say, hey, that's cool, or that's really good. You would think that doing something like this would eliminate or would be easier for the kids who had been on the team before. And it's worth mentioning that we make all of the veteran members go through everything just like the new kids, even the essays on the application. And it's not, because it's a different mindset. In fact, it's probably more frustrating for the veteran kids who want to do more involved things with the robot that they don't have time to do or that their groups don't understand. And so taking it back to a real simple robot build is not easier for them at that point. In fact, it's probably more difficult. But we do divide out our veteran members amongst the groups that we have. So as you watch this video, it's just a couple minutes, but you'll see that they were playing the game, and you'll hear the corrections and things that we are saying in the background. And this is just a sample of a game. There's a million different ways this kind of thing could be done. If you didn't have you want to do a competitive thing, you could have it be a task that, they needed to build a robot that could pick up something. You just have to remember that you want to keep it so simple that it's not intimidating to your newbies. The other thing that you'll notice is that this is where we end up making a lot of decisions that are teacher-based and not necessarily coach-based. There's, for instance, in this video, you'll see there's a young man who's very quiet. You can tell he gets really interested and he's, kind of firing up. But before robotics, this was not a child who would have voiced his opinion or been comfortable arguing for what he thought should be done. And what we saw in him was a kid who would be really good at this, that the robotics program would turn into and bring out in him confidence about his ability to converse with other kids. It worked. He's a very, very much better kid by the end of the year as far as being able to vocalize his wants and things like that. So when we did these things and we videotaped them, when we went back home and we watched them and we talked about it, these were things that we were looking for. It was not who won the Mario Kart game, but who played it the best.
Yeah, actually, everybody on the winning team actually didn't make it on the competitive team in the end. So, and that's just part of it. Oh. If you popped, you got to go back to base. And then switch. And then switch.
Go, 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 go.
Okay. Turtle's on his back. Turtle's on his back. Fix the turtle. Change, yep.
Hey, stop! Okay, so when talking about once you've chosen your team, how you maintain that team to keep on building on a program, one of the only things that I have laughed about saying that we have actually come to blows about is the division of practice. And it's very difficult when the teams are working on driving and they want to keep modifying the robot, that every time they do that, that changes the coder's job. So one of the things that we've done is make a division in practice where half the time is spent with the bot driving and half the time is spent with the coding, so that we maintain the idea that both of those jobs are equally important. Same thing with the book. They both have to spend time working on the book. One of the proud coach moments this year was when we had to keep coming to blows about working on the book, and that's something that if you've had a team you're aware of. But then after our boys, who normally do a really great job driving, had an off day, they still won the Excellence Award, and the judges had said it was because of the book. And so our team drivers turned to the girls who had specifically been pushing the book and thanked them for making them continue to work on it. So figuring out that way to divide practice in such a way that you are maintaining the belief that all parts of the team are important.
So, in addition to that, we also provide opportunities and goals for them to achieve, and if they meet those goals, then we can provide them some sort of incentive, whether that's, you know, stopping and going and playing a game, just doing something other than a robotics focused practice. I mean, sometimes it's just a treat, but, you know, setting goals, meeting those goals, and then continuing to push those goals. So anytime they achieve a goal, a new goal is automatically set. But you have to also make sure that you're making it obtainable at some point. I mean, at the beginning of the year, we don't set the score that we want in state as our goal. We set, okay, so this is what's going to likely be winning tournaments this month, so this is going to be our goal for scoring. Or you know, for coding, you know, we want you to get this, this, and this scored. Again, just, you know, a reasonable expectation. It gives them something to achieve, and then once they achieve that, they feel a sense of accomplishment, and you get an opportunity to reward them, and then you get to set a new goal. So it's just, you know, it's constantly building upon the previous goal.
And as he's mentioned in other things, because they will have 4 or 5 robots over the course of the year, there's always one robot that's in the process of being built and one robot that is competition ready. So as the drivers have honed working on that, then there's also the building of another robot so that we are perfecting that craft and things like that. Also, as we are at tournaments and things like that, we make sure that our team stays together. They cheer for each other. If Team A is driving, Team C goes. We're going to apologize. Our grandchildren are here and in the background. As Team C is competing, that means that Team A and B should be watching them unless they're queuing. That Cold Spring is a team together, and that we all celebrate and work with each other. And we know that ultimately our teams frequently end up competing against each other, but that we treat the Cold Spring Robotic as a family that does things together. If the news shows up, they all come. Whereas as opposed to the individual team A, B's, and C's and stuff at tournaments. All of these things also about maintaining the team is maintaining a team and a spirit. Sometimes that means that there's difficult decisions that have to be made about who's on your team and who remains on your team. For instance, we had a young man this year who, despite warnings and working with his parents and talking about it consistently, got a bad attitude when he was at the boards. If another team struggled, the Alliance team struggled, or if he wasn't pleased with the way that he reacted. And this rolled over not only to tournament behavior, but then within the practices, he would become so arrogant and rude that he was making other members of the team upset. Now, despite the fact that he technically was a better driver and he had a better understanding, he ultimately wasn't allowed to compete anymore because he was damaging the feeling and the idea behind our team as a whole. And so, because we could not condone his behavior, he wasn't allowed to compete, and that allowed the other team members to kind of grow. So we're not saying as a general rule we like to cut people from the team, but it sometimes is important that you are capable of having hard conversations and dealing with that if that's what needs to happen. Okay, so one of the other things that we've done at Cold Spring is work on other programs that kind of feed into the robotics program. So the robotics team is our VEX team is our competitive team, but there are other things that we have going on in the school. Probably the most prevalent and parallel to that is a junior robotics program. We had all of these people coming in. That's our granddaughter, isn't she cute? We had all these people coming in with their little ones, and they're like, hey, when does robotics start? We're so excited. And we'd be like, 4th grade. So we decided we had to do something with those K-3 kids. As it was when we started it, we used the Dash and Dot Wonder Workshop things. And we have a bi-weekly program, and we do it in the evening, and the parents come, and we were using the missions that were created by them, and that was a competition, and it was all online. And that worked out really well. We're excited this year that VEX had the 1, 2, 3 and go, and we planned on kind of merging over to using that. Things being what they are with COVID, we're not sure how extracurriculars are going to work at all. But we do know that we had kids that were in junior robotics for a year and had maxed out everything that they could learn. And since they're using Dash and Dot, it was mostly code. And so those kids were allowed to be in robotics as 3rd graders. And they held their own. They did great. So, but it was kind of like well, that's an allowance we'll make if you've done this. Also, the kids whose parents are not on board with 2 to 3 practices a week and Saturday competitions, they can also take part in the junior robotics and non-competitive robotics using the Q robots. We also have PLTW.
Right, and so the construction kits that they use in the PLTW, not just the 5th grade robotics kits, but and they use them in 3rd grade and 4th grade, and so there's a lot of other building components that foster, an understanding of the VEX program. And so there are some kids who don't really consider themselves robotics kids that then get into those activities, and then they are like, wow, I really liked building with those, and so suddenly they want to try out for the robotics team. So if you don't have PLTW in your school, you're kind of missing out. It also teaches them a lot about the design process, and so it definitely does help with our success level, I believe.
And also brings in more supplies because the PLTW modules require purchases of so many of the kits, and so you can rotate parts and borrow as needed. We also have a Girls Who Code, which was a fairly new this year, and that was some of those kids were robotics kids, but some of them were other kids, and this is just another instance where these kids are talking about things they learn or things they've done through robotics with other kids who then gain an interest, and they're like, well, what do you mean? What'd you do? So our Girls Who Code, I do not follow the curriculum that is given exactly. We used Adafruit playgrounds and things like that. So a lot of coding. That's what our kids were most interested in doing. So we have other things going on in the school that kind of build on and lead to more interest in our robotics program. Okay, so before we open this up to general questions, we'll go back to making sure we covered the questions that we get asked the most when we go places and talk. And the first one is, how many teams? And that's based on what you have by way of supplies. A lot of, if you have only 4 brains, then 2 teams. It becomes a matter of you can't have too many things going on. You can't ask for too many spreading of supplies. Also, you have to have backups because things go wrong. And the other question a lot turns into, how many teams is too many teams if you have an infinite number of supplies, and how many members per team?
So I would definitely say your ratio cannot be more than 2 teams per 1 coach. Again, to give them the proper motivation, modeling, attention they need. I couldn't see, even being an experienced coach, I can't see doing more than 2 teams per coach. As far as members per team, I would say 6 to 8 members per team. And I would say that I would plan on, if I had 8 members, I'd plan on dropping 2 if needed. I would not hesitate.
Can I have this? Can I have this?
It's okay. Sorry. The COVID has made for an interesting, everybody's got to do their part, and so we end up babysitting some. One of the things to bear in mind about if you have to drop one is, ultimately speaking, by the time you get to the end of the season, we have hard conversations about the kids with the fact that once we get to the point that we get towards state, we're going to let the best drivers drive. We're going to have a backup plan in case, we say this all the time, somebody falls and breaks their wrist or whatever, but ultimately you're going to do what's best for the team by the time you get to the end. So we encourage the other kids to drive at practice and to get better, but by the time you get to the end, you will have a smaller number than you started with. That's kind of true of any sport. Don't see that as a failure on your part. Also, we run into a lot of people who be like, well, I had 42 kids show up interested, and so I have 3 teams. And none of those kids are getting to spend enough time or learning enough to be successful enough to help you build a program. And so that's wherein I think a lot of people maybe would be better off to turn around and try to have some extracurricular things that weren't the competitive team.